Welcome to RevOps Revolution, where we focus on changing the game for driving revenue. I'm your host, Jesse Morris, and each episode, we take a look at the different areas that affect change and drive revenue across your organization. If this is your first time joining us, please subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Here's to the revolution. Welcome to another day of the revolution. I am your host, Jesse Morris. And I'm excited today. I've got my friend and colleague, Tanner Lauringson, on the call with us. Tanner, good to have you, man. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So Tanner is an AE, so excited to kick off this series with bringing an AE on. He's a top performer. He's been doing this for quite a while. He works in SaaS, and this last year he achieved over 180% at quota. And fun story how we met. We'll get into that in a little bit, but really appreciate you hopping on. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here. And I'll tell you a bit about myself. So originally from California, I'm 32 years old, married. I now live in Parker, Colorado, not too far away from you. In terms of hobbies and fun things I like to do, I own a digital marketing agency on the side. Worked with basically small companies locally, sometimes overseas. And then I've been training and coaching beach volleyball for the last 10 years. The last year, I've actually transitioned into learning some other sports like tennis, golf, and hunting. In terms of my background, after college, I came out to Colorado from my first job working for Eric Weinmayer, who's the first blind man to climb Everest and the 7 summits. So that was a really cool step into the corporate space. And then I went into digital ad marketing, worked for an agency for a bit, and then a large media group. And then I pivoted into SaaS and probably worked for 6 different companies, small and big.
That's awesome, man. The Eric thing is really cool because I remember watching that I think there was a movie about him, right? About him climbing Everest blind, right? Super cool guy. And I saw him speak up when I used to live in Eagle, so up near Vail, years ago, which was super cool. So fascinating guy. So at some point we'll have to dig into that one a little bit more, but that's really cool. Well, thanks for joining me, and I'm excited today. I'm excited to talk through just a couple of different topics. I think, one of the things I think it's easy, especially in the revenue ops space, is it's easy to get so operations focused that you forget that the whole purpose of our existence in a lot of ways is to support you guys and really enable and help drive revenue for the company, in partnership with AEs. And so excited to kind of dive in today, get some of your perspectives on some things. One of the things I love, and you and I talked about this a lot, is how we met. And so, fun story. I'll let you kind of go in a little bit more, but, Tanner cold reached out to me. I think you sent me a LinkedIn message. Was that what it was? A LinkedIn message?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So you sent me a LinkedIn message, and I think it was something as basic as like, hey, I'm looking to meet up with RevOps leaders. Love to grab coffee. That was pretty simple, short and sweet. And it's funny because I get hit up all the time by AEs or SDRs, and I never take meetings. And part of it is because actually very few people or shouldn't even say meetings. Like I don't really often respond. But the funny thing is I think you're like this last year, I think I had 3 people reach out and offer up an actual meeting. And I met with all 3 of those. So it's kind of funny, like little things like that I think most people aren't willing to either. Obviously it helps that we're local, but aren't necessarily willing to go meet in person, and how in this kind of more remote world, it's very different. So like, can you talk to us a little bit about some of your strategy with outreach and what that looks like?
Yeah, happy to do so. I'll talk about our example first. So I work in professional services, different than SaaS. SaaS, I feel like a product can speak for itself, and you can find your ICP and just basically get in front of them, and you'll be able to nail the messaging and get their attention. Professional services is very much your people are your product, and people buy from folks they've worked with in the past, people they're referred to, or maybe they'll go out and find someone. You have to be at the top of that list through however they do that, through a community or something else. So the way I think about cold outreach is need to find a hand raiser. So someone saying, hey, I have a project or a problem that you can solve. And I find where they're communicating that. Or I find a way to connect with them personally. And I'm new to RevOps. Like I've kind of been curious about it. And when I joined the company, didn't really know much. And so what I knew though was that, hey, people locally are willing to connect normally. If you're authentic, if you really care about possibly building a professional relationship. And RevOps is really niche in terms of their career choice. And so folks in that network are always looking to connect with each other. So what I did was, hey, I need to grow a pipeline. Me and my rep at the time, we're going to create a list of VPs that are based in each of our states. We're going to identify those folks. We're going to create a very simple and short message, and then we'll follow up. And we're going to do that through LinkedIn. And that was something we did, one of our several approaches, but that one was actually the most successful. Not targeting people who are hiring for RevOps, not people that just raise money who are needing to scale their sales teams. It was actually the best cold outreach performing, I guess you'd say, campaign was just connecting with people locally.
Which is fascinating when you think about it, like, because I think most people would get super scientific about things. And even like, I do this, I'm just as guilty as the next of, you hit on a couple of key areas of focus, right? Like those that are hiring for RevOps, that'd be a supernatural, you think very easy funnel, but you chose connection. And I think that like when you boil it down to, would you not like, you probably would agree with me on that of like, that is such a key part of sales is like the willingness to connect with people. And I think that willingness in a lot of ways communicates a lack, not necessarily like, I think a lot of people in sales are like, I got to get a sale right now. When you went about it, you really thought more long-term strategy, right? It was like, you know what? I'm less focused on the sale. I need sales. I need pipeline. I'm more focused on, building longer-term relationships. Some of that will translate into dollars in the short term, but also potential opportunities long-term, right?
Yeah, 100%. And totally agree. It's funny, as I've gone through my career, slow playing is so much more impactful. And through messaging, always doing the test of would I talk to someone who sent me this message? If I was an executive, if I was the VP of this persona, and that's helped.
So that's a fun one to hit on is I always call it perspective. Like I think about that in data a lot too, is like, it's easy to get in your own little world. So as an AE, you could have just been like, okay, this sounds good to me. I'm going to send this out. But what you just said is, hey, actually taking a step back and putting your hat on of the person you're sending it to and thinking, would you actually engage with this if that was you? And so there's something super powerful of like understanding perspective of people. And so you might not have understood the space of RevOps, but you actually understood people innately, right? Which I think is such a key piece of all of this. Like, talk to me a little bit about, this was your first year this last year, right? Doing this. And yet you had a banner year. And so when you think about like, you didn't know, like, I think this is what's really interesting because I think a lot of reps would say, the first year you're not going to be successful or, it's a slower time to ramp. And all these things are, don't get me wrong, make it more challenging, but you figured out a path forward. Like you actually figured out not only how to achieve, but overachieve your quota in an industry you didn't necessarily know a ton about. And for a new company, what were some of those things that when you look back now, would you say were really helpful in driving some of that success?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think when I was looking at joining the company, I think first it comes down to selection of the company, having a strategy and refining that strategy. So when I knew I was curious about RevOps, I had to choose professional services or a SaaS platform. Then number two, I had to find opportunity. I decided to identify a company that was doing founder-led sales that didn't have a marketing arm, but I was able to do enough research to understand that they had a very high quality product. So if I do my job well of selling and communicating the story of a high quality product or delivery, I'll have success. Like that's the simple way I thought about it. And that's what happened. And so honestly, we're the company I'm with now, primarily off of referrals and inbound and community-based business, still some prospecting and cold outbound there, but it's based off of finding companies that have a good quality product or do good work. And that's something that's really set me up for success is finding the right company. But when you're new, there's other ways to think about it. And I think we can talk about that a bit later.
Awesome. Appreciate that. And I get it. One of the things when you and I've talked about is winning the week, right? When you think back on your last year, and I've seen this a lot with reps in my career is it seems like the ones that do really well they're not so focused on the month or the quarter or the year. It's very much like, what are the things I need to do to win the week? What are you doing to set yourself up for success each week to go about tackling that challenge?
Yeah, so I've worked in larger companies and smaller companies. As you work in a smaller company, your roles or areas that you touch widen and become more broad. And this is probably my third or fourth startup or small company. Um, and so being able to organize yourself and focus on priorities becomes much more difficult, but more important. So on every week on Sundays, I'll basically take the afternoon, look at the last week, identify, hey, what do I need to get done as a priority next week? Like what's my list of has to be done the following week? I'll look at what happened previously, what carries over. Then I'll create just an action item list, a checkbox list of Monday, and that's what I do. And then during Monday, I'm constantly creating lists for Tuesday or Wednesday of things that need to be done. And so that's really how I think about it. I try and keep things as simple and linear as possible as I think about priorities. And as long as I don't get too convoluted or make things confusing, then I'm successful.
When you think about that week, are there things that you're, setting as far as goals or even things you're saying no to on a regular basis?
Yeah, being a small company, like you're constantly being hit up to take on more or from other third parties, vendors, things like that. So I would say a big part of that planning on Sunday is saying no. So for example, this week, probably canceled 5 to 7 meetings for the week because number one, they weren't a priority. Priority right now is building pipeline. So how do I pare that back, consolidate meetings, think about the week? So I think a big part is saying no. Number two is preparation. So, hey, if I set up this meeting for tomorrow, what do I need to do in order to make this successful? Or do I need to do by Tuesday for Wednesday? On the other side of that, what do I need to ask for that hasn't happened? Am I confused about this meeting at all, this time? And do I communicate that? Yeah, I don't have a problem sending a message to people on Sunday or scheduling that to ping them on Monday morning.
That's awesome, man. I think, you said something there of, asking for clarification. I think a lot of times reps in particular, especially more senior reps, sometimes are afraid for that. But one of the worst things you can do, I can somebody who gets sold a lot of software or solutions, is come unprepared, right? And so it's fascinating. Like sometimes just being willing to put yourself out there and say, I might have missed this, or can I clarify this? I actually really respect when people do that because it communicates to me a level of respect for time. So that makes a huge difference. When you think about your career and some of your big wins, and by the way, congrats on your huge win today. Tanner just closed, I think thanks. The largest deal of his career, which is awesome. So good day for us to be doing this. Can you talk a little bit about some of those big wins and, what set you apart during those times?
Yeah. So we talked about this previously as we were thinking about this podcast, and there was 2 I pointed out because this is a good question. And having a couple of different roles, it's like, okay, what are the 2? And it's funny, you forget about so many. And I'm going to add a third that I just remembered here, but I think it ties into your comments to me. So number 1, I was working for a website CMS platform that white labeled their CMS. So basically a website building platform. We were targeting market agencies, and that was how the business was built. That was our ICP. I was on the mid-market team. And then I went to a Google Summit. At the Google Summit, the year previously, it was all market agencies. So that's why we were invited, because, hey, we're a top vendor for website creation for new companies. Basically, Google's incubator. This year, at the time, I think maybe it was 2019, maybe earlier, it was all SaaS businesses. We had no idea. The only reason I came with my VP was because my CEO didn't want to come to this event. It was in La Jolla, San Diego, California. So beautiful area, beautiful golf course. It was 5-star hotel. It was amazing. But we realized quickly, hey, there's all these SaaS companies here. Like, what the heck is going on? This isn't our ICP. Well, we quickly identified all of these SaaS companies needed a website platform to slap on top of their tool. What I mean by that is, for example, if they're let's say a flooring company that now owns the data for every type of flooring material in every house in the entire country, and they've aggregated that data and organized it, and it's never been done before. Well, now what they're doing is they're going to every small business that owns a flooring company and saying, hey, we, number one, have the data in the platform. I'll also sell you a website, and I'll do the marketing for you. And so we fulfilled number two, which was the website. So from that Google Summit, we pivoted to only going after SaaS businesses because we had a REST API that allowed folks to do this automatically once you set it up. That increased us going up market. We were able to call ourselves a bit enterprise. And that led me to be a leader on the team, along with some of my colleagues. And that was a big win. It was really cool to see us switch ICPs and learn as we go and struggle and fight through that. And then also have success and completely shift where our marketing dollars went. So that's the first one. I'll pause there for a minute.
So when you think back at that moment, like what was the light bulb moment? Like what was there something that triggered that kind of epiphany of how you could service that marketplace?
Yeah, I wish I could take credit. It was my VP that said, he simplified it into, hey, here's the three things that all these SaaS businesses have. They have one, a back office platform that they offer. So if we talk about the flooring business, that was being able to analyze the data. Number two, they have a way to spin up websites for these local businesses. And then number three was marketing. And that three trio allowed us to then approach SaaS companies and say, hey, I can tell from your website that you have two of the three, and you're probably going to do the third by next year. When are you doing this? And the VP or CEO or whoever would respond like, yeah, we're actually figuring out how to do this right now. And so this is the first time selling something where you could know where all of these businesses' roadmaps were heading and give them customized messaging with confidence from a cold outbound approach. So that was really cool.
That's really cool that you were able to meet them where they were at, right? It was, I think it conveys a level of knowledge and understanding, like you understand my business, which is what people really look for, right? But B, you're also meeting them where they're at versus this, you're trying to sell them something that maybe is not what they're looking for at the time, right? Which makes a huge difference. Awesome.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what was your next example?
Yeah. So the other one's a bit more straightforward, and it was just a cool one. So I transitioned from when I was working for a very small company, I think Series A, in the water space, and then moved into enterprise marketing resource management. I was a team of a larger sales group of about 40 sales reps. I was on a team of about 5 or so. And when I joined, I had a number, I think it was 800K for annual quota. And I was like, crap, this is the biggest number I've had ever. How am I going to have success? I don't know the product. I'm now moving into what's called enterprise. How am I going to do this? And the first thing I did was I made sure to listen to all of my peers. And I didn't just listen to the peers on my team that were high performers, but I went above even to the top or the higher tier of enterprise. And I said, what do I need to do to be successful? And this is a no-brainer, and a lot of people do it, but they said, go after your close lost. Like, you need to nail your close lost as soon as you get in, and you're going to have success. So go into Salesforce, run your report, and do that. Like, you're not going to be handheld like, here's Tanner, here's your 30-day plan. This week, you're going to do your close lost campaign. It was, I ran the report, and I just started messaging people as soon as I could. As soon as I got access, I started messaging individuals. And so within 2 weeks, I believe, I had a response from someone that said, hey, this is the person that's owning this evaluation this year. We know we need to do it. And I believe that deal, it actually didn't close before I left, but it's what actually may have been the highest deal for the team at the time once it did close. And I got it pretty much to the finish line. And it established credibility for me, and it took pressure off me when I first joined an organization. So I think number one, earning your stripes early is what I learned through that experience. And it was really cool just to have success going after close lost. It was an amazing product, and I'll talk about that later, like the types of products every rep should sell. But that was a good example of working for a company that has a very good product and speaks for itself, and you just have to find people at the right time. And that's what I was able to do there.
Makes a huge difference. Can you talk a little bit about your messaging? Like when you do your close loss campaign, high level, it doesn't have to be too detailed, but like, what did your messaging look like when you revisited those old ops?
Yeah. It's always fun, right? Like you join an organization and you get to understand their hygiene, or whoever was working the op, what their transparency or hygiene looks like in Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using. So unfortunately, there wasn't a ton of information, but fortunately also there was activity tracking on the emails. So taking the time to understand as much as you can. If the information's there, you should know it and you should be able to use it in your messaging. I think it's so easy when you're new to take the shortcut and just think you can say, hey, is it a good time to pick up the conversation? And people will respond because they remember you. People never remember you. They don't care unless you remind them why they care. And so that's where for this one specifically, I actually used messaging that related back to their priorities. I think I had their old deal deck, their proposal, reviewed that. And so that just helped me say, hey, this was a priority for your roadmap. Is that still true? I know it was hard for you because you're, who was it? Was it the CFO? The CFO unfortunately had to pass because of annual budget. I know you're in a new year. Is this a project that can be prioritized because it was on the slate for last year?
Huge. And that you said you had a bonus example for us?
Yeah. So this one goes back to the website CMS company. And this was a fun one where it was early in my career for a SaaS company. And I had an individual where we pivoted going after SaaS companies. This company is based in the Netherlands. They sold basically sports tech, so software for soccer clubs in Europe that allowed them to run their scheduling, their pay, their payments. Basically, a member paid $1 per person. So, and they had that covered throughout Europe and very successful. What they didn't have was a way to spin up websites for each soccer club. So this individual found us either through my outreach or some other way. And what they did was they probably gave me 8 false verbals. And what I mean by that is I was speaking directly to the CEO, and he said, Tanner, I will sign today. And he probably said that 8 times over the course of 3 weeks at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And so I think every rep needs to go through that experience, and hopefully as early as possible, so that you never trust it and get your hopes up. And the emotional flow of it is good to experience early on. So fortunately, I had that happen. He ended up closing when I was about to go work out with my trainer at the gym. Like I had to take the call in the middle of a workout. I was like, I need to close this deal. I need to jump out. Unfortunately, it closed, but it did take 8 false verbals to finally get there. And it was just hilarious. Also, I wonder, hold on, give me a second. I might have something that ties into that. He sent me a goalkeeper's jersey
That's
from
awesome.
the Netherlands of one of the top goalies. And he actually we ended up working together in the future. So even though he gave me 8 false verbals, it still built a relationship. And I didn't hold it against him. It's just, that was a funny experience.
You know, it's funny, like, even when I was in sales as a rep myself, you know, I remember some of those where at the time it felt like the world was falling apart. And, you know, it's frustrating a lot of times because you put so much time and energy and you feel like you've done all the right things. And then you realize either, you know, and a lot of times it's easy in those moments to, you know, get frustrated at the potential, your prospect, But I oftentimes think too, I'm sure there's some things even in some of those false starts where you learned, hey, I should have probably asked this clarifying question. Was there anything in those moments that you can look back? Because one of the things I talk a lot about is own what you can own. And own what you can own is a little bit more specific than ownership of it doesn't just mean at the end of the day, it probably was mostly on them of why they false started. But were there any little things along the way where you were like, man, I could have done this a little bit better. And for next time, this is a good takeaway. Any of those nuggets from that 8 false starts?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm pretty critical of myself for good or bad. I think there's always something I could do better as a sales rep, especially in a sales cycle. And in that one, I needed to ask, why aren't you signing today? Hey, if you gave me a false verbal, why did it not go forward? And I think something I've learned, and you talked about this earlier in terms of planning or with meetings, but it's early communication and being direct. There should never be elephants in the room. If there's an elephant in the room, communicate about it and eliminate the elephant in the room. So I think that's something I could have done better to manage that. What ended up happening was they signed with us, but they didn't have the resources engineering wise yet. So they were waiting to figure out their hiring plan to have the developer that could work with our REST API and basically implement it. It ended up taking them 3 months after purchasing to actually find value to implement the platform. So maybe that was even early. He may have just signed because he liked me. So I think getting a better understanding of, hey, we agreed on this. Why wasn't it met? And having the confidence to ask. I think a lot of reps get scared to ask the hard questions, where the hard questions are what make you successful. I think Salesforce trained the reps to be really good at that. Sometimes maybe on the other side, but it's something that reps learn over time to be more direct and get the answers to the questions they need.
Yeah, the direct thing, I myself really appreciate that. And I know not everybody does, but there is something you said, especially when you're running. I can tell you as a, client prospect, sometimes it's helpful to just have that step back because even for us, even if I've done a lot of deals, sometimes I forget part of the process potentially, does it need to go through InfoSec or is there this extra form I need to get filled out? And does that maybe take longer than other things? And so, yeah, I think it's almost a detriment if AEs assume, hey, this VP or whoever has been doing this long enough, they should know. Sometimes they're just busy. And so, don't it's not always I think it's almost like this, I don't want to ask because I feel like it's an inconvenience or I may be being rude. And I would say definitely ask. At the end of the day, as long as you do it in a respectful way, there's not a whole lot to lose there. So completely aligned on that one. When you think about some of these deals and even just your career, again, you had a really killer year this last year and you've had a fair amount, you put together in a row. What would you say, sets you apart? What were some of the, fundamentals that really set you apart as a rep from other reps?
Yeah, I think it's number one, learning. I think you constantly have to be learning. If you challenge yourself to learn, you'll get better. As soon as you turn yourself off to learning, you'll stay at the same level. So I think I recognized, hey, I'm never going to be perfect. I'm going to need to get better. But how do I do that? I just don't do that from my perspective because my perspective is limited. So I need to do what I can. And so when I was starting out, it was, what can I do if I don't have the experience? Well, if I'm new to SaaS, I've done a little bit of sales, but I know that you need to be organized. You need to focus on execution. That means you need to follow up the same day with clients after a demo and recap and make sure you nail that, never miss that. If you commit to a timeline or doing something, you have to nail that to give confidence to whoever's buying from you. Coachability, I think every sales manager has a favorite, even though it's ideal not to have favorites. It's natural. And making sure that you're coachable to your manager. And then curious, you have to be curious about what you're selling and the people you sell to and the challenges. I think going back to a couple of my jobs, seeing the curiosity that my VPs or my managers had and how much they had dug into the pain points of the customers and what they shared with me that kind of like fueled me to get more curious and to adapt that and dive even further. So I think all of that's in your control and something you can do early on top of learning together, working with your teammates. If you're fortunate enough to work with a team, working with the folks that have done it really well and can share with you, but then also taking people under your wing. They'll pay it forward somehow. Like if it's not today, they'll pay it forward eventually. And it's just really rewarding because it makes you better at what you're communicating when you're training someone.
I think one of the cool things that you've highlighted today is like you'd have excuses, right? And you haven't let the excuses get in the way. So, you think back on this last year, you could have easily, kind of leaned against the crutch of, I don't know RevOps well enough. I haven't really sold services, in a while, or a myriad of excuses. And what I just heard you say is forget, all the things that you don't have, focus on the things that you actually, can control, and really leverage those to set you apart. And it's funny, man, like I bought a new data vendor this last year. We did this huge bake off, and like one of the best sales executions I've ever experienced. And this rep, he set up weekly meetings with me, and every meeting that I was on, he would always schedule the next meeting. And sometimes we get on the call and it'd be like, hey, I don't have an update for you today. Let's talk next week. Cool. What time next week can we do? But for whatever reason, like that consistency, and he would send me a summary after every single call we had, even if it was 3 sentences long. Hey, here's what we covered today. Here's the action items for you, action items for me. And for me, again, busy as I am, it really helped keep the things moving along. And it really helped me to feel some accountability as well of like, look, we're both investing our time into this. I think a lot of times in sales, it's easy to get in this, well, the rep is at my mercy as a buyer. And to a degree, obviously, there's a little bit of truth to it. But at the same time, like you talked earlier about saying no. And I think, you want to focus on the highest value opportunities. And those opportunities typically come with good partnerships, for lack of a better word, right? Like behind it. And so it's fascinating to me that you didn't mention any of these uncontrollables. You mentioned like the basics things. And as somebody who buys a lot of software, man, I have a lot of respect for it. And I'm sure it doesn't work for everybody, but it works more times than not, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I realize now that I didn't quite answer your original question about, I went to starting out, but when I talk about why I had success the last 2 years, I'll tie into that. I think when you're starting out, having good coaching that teaches you sales frameworks. If you didn't learn that yet, learning MedPIC, BANT, SPICE from Win by Design, you need to have that foundation and you need to practice it and you need to have a good trainer and you need to be held accountable to using it. If you get those reps, it becomes intuitive no matter where you go. And I think why I've had success the last couple of years is I know what equation will make me successful. And what I mean by that is what variables do I need? When I'm joining a new company, I need a good product. I need good clients that we've had success with that I can communicate about, or good stories. And I needed to have opportunity, meaning I can grow the company. If I have those three things, I'll be successful. And that's what I took on the last several years and has allowed me to be successful. So I think having that background of going through different deal frameworks allows me to sell RevOps, sell water SaaS or IoT hardware, sell retail LMS, website CMS, ad tech. Like it doesn't matter. Like I know I can learn software and then I can learn the challenges, the success stories, and I can fit into any organization.
That's huge. Ultimately, it's really like I always think about it as exercising, right? It's like you got those basic exercises you're doing at the beginning to really build the foundation. And then really you're just using those similar models, but tweaking them obviously based on the industry, the challenges, and the people ultimately. But at the end of the day, people are still people. So that's awesome. When you think about 2024, again, coming off of a killer year, are there any new strategies, tools, processes you're thinking about going into this year?
Yeah, I think I when you work for a startup, it's always hard to take a year at a time for planning and like back out, because larger organizations tend to think of more annual planning. It's more formalized, so it's always good to take a step back, even in the business of a small company. So I think one thing, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, but is that budget stream ownership. It's maybe some people say it's cheesy, but it's a very simple concept. Is everything that you work on, you own. What I mean by that is, hey, my sales number is almost doubling this year. Now I need to take extreme ownership of that. I can't have excuses as to what's happening, why it might not be successful. If the economy tanks or it's a challenging year again, I can't control that. What I can control is how am I going to be successful. So taking extreme ownership to 2024, I try and do that for every year, but think about it more this year. So what that looks like is doubling down on what's doing well. What I mean by that is not taking on too much. It was tempting my first year to explore this partnership, that partnership, too many partnerships, too many opportunities. Now I kind of understand where the low-hanging fruit is, and that should allow me to grow and accelerate more. So if I kind of narrow that in a bit more, for example, this week I've gone after all of my closed loss for the last year. So 2023, everyone closed loss from last year has received a message from me that is customized, that has some pertaining language to what we talked about. So that's number one. So building pipeline early and front loading your year as much as possible. Number two is it's easy to get distracted with cold outreach. Cold outreach takes a lot more effort. So what's your low-hanging fruit? It's probably closed loss. But then how do you define cold outreach? Is that, hey, like hitting up someone locally to you? Well, it's not quite cold. Like I would call that maybe a lukewarm person that you might see at the grocery store. If you knew who they were, they'd probably talk to you, versus hitting someone up randomly in another state. So I think understanding what your ROI is by tactic and going down that list. So for me, starting with closed loss. Number two, it's existing business. Three, it's referrals, and going from that list and making sure I execute on that early. And then think about the whole year as a whole. Where I'm at now is we don't have a marketing person. And that tends to fall to me and the CEO of the company, which isn't bad. I like marketing, but making sure we have a plan for the year. Last year, it was really reactionary. Like, here's the events we're going to, sweet, jump on a plane, here we go. Here's who's coming. But having a strategy to it. So, hey, what are, for example, we're going to do some more medical conferences this year. What's that mean to be successful? I last year didn't have the bandwidth to do all the follow-ups from events like I wanted to. Like I did the follow-ups to every person I met, but we hosted a happy hour and we had a lead list of maybe 100 people. And I didn't do the right amount of effort to follow up with all those people, but that was based off of ROI of active deals. So understand how everything fits in. Another thing is community-based growth. A lot of people talk about how 2023 was a hard year, transitioning into community-led sales, community-led, focuses. RevOps is huge for that. So I work a lot with folks in Pavilion, like I'm part of the Colorado chapter. I saw you just joined. And so what I like to do is just have basically more and more connections, connect with people locally, connect with people either that post a challenge, like, hey, I've reached out probably to, 5 people in the last 2 months that just said something. I'm struggling with this about RevOps, and I'll go message my team, and then I'll schedule with that person. I'll just offer free advice. And that's just building this community feel. And the more we give awareness, if people have a positive experience with us, I might not have a marketing arm, but what I do have is hand raisers asking for help and us offering that time. And to me, that's a high ROI in the long term. So communities is a big focus for me. Next thing is I'm hiring a senior AE, which is great. That'll allow me to accelerate in terms of sales. And something that's interesting is we're doing, instead of it's a small company, instead of a individual based comp plan, like, hey, I'm the head of sales, then we have a senior AE. We're actually doing one combined plan. And I think that's a really strong recommendation for me for small companies The reason for that is now I can bring this person. We don't have to separate deals. Hey, you're mid-market SMB, I'm enterprise or strategic. Now I want to develop you. I want you to learn. I can bring you into an enterprise deal to help. So that's really cool and awesome that my CEO was open to that. And then another one is making it easy for companies to refer us. Like we grow a lot through referrals today, and people that have used us previously, but we don't have an operationalized system behind it. And thinking about how I'm going to do that. I would say I don't have the answer today, but I know a lot of people have done it really well, and the answer's out there. So I just have to figure that out.
It's huge. It sounds like you've got a good, plan at least in place to work towards this year. And I think, we're 10 days in. And the funny thing to me is I was talking to a CEO earlier of a smaller company about his reps, and he has 3 reps, and none of them have even really picked up the phone this year. So it's fun to see. And I think, when I look at the best reps out there, there's not this lackadaisical approach to the year. It's very much, hey, we're going to come in with a plan. We might not have it all figured out, as you just mentioned. Like, hey, you've identified, here's an area I want to focus on. I haven't figured out necessarily how to do it, but that's huge. Starting off, the year with A, some momentum with some of that outreach you've done, but B, also with just some clear, I would say almost like confirmation epiphanies for what worked well last year, but also here's some tweaks or some things I want to kind of focus and back to your continuous learning, right? It plays right into that, which is awesome. When you think back on your sales career and, where you are today versus where you were back then, what are some things that you would tell new reps, but also, within that, like we talked a little bit about differentiation and what makes you stand out, but what are just high level, if you had to say again, hey, foundationally, these are things new reps should learn, but then just day to day, here are some things that can set you apart from 90% of other reps. What are some of those things?
Yeah. So some of the things I wish I learned earlier is, and this kind of ties into my background. If anyone looks at my LinkedIn, they'll see, hey, Tanner's been at this company maybe 3 years, the longest, and probably like a year and a half on average. And the reason for that is I've learned to recognize that sometimes there's macro factors in your organization that impact your success. And then there's the counter of that, which the path I didn't take, which is if you stay with an organization, you'll be able to learn and develop your career as a leader, or to refine that and build your book of business or really your skill. I took the other route, which was if I identified a major business unit that was impacting me as a sales rep, I would leave. So I mean by that, if marketing wasn't doing what marketing should do, that's open to whoever. And marketing always, or sales always criticizes marketing, but there is a way, either find a way to understand what's realistic expectations or not, talking with your VPs or your managers, and really get their opinion of where their head is at. If they tell you, yeah, I'm really frustrated too, but things are changing, or if they say, yeah, I agree with you. It's just good to have that awareness and build that awareness of what does a well-functioning engine look like. Another piece is your leadership. Is your leadership in the sales organization making you better? Is it making the organization better? I was with an organization where we were in a very good product, one of the best, maybe the best for what we did, and we were 100% dependent on inbound. It was an enterprise product, and we did exercises to basically, I would say, posture prospecting, but they weren't successful. When the real work should have been channel sales and collaboration with marketing. And that wasn't being done at the leadership level, in my opinion. And so I decided to leave. And that sometimes happens. The next one is product. Understanding if your product is changing, if it's evolving, how it's positioned in the market, what that looks like. Having that awareness with yourself, with your teammates, with your VP. Number one, to sell better, to communicate transparently, or I guess, authentically with your customers, but then also understand what the next year looks like for the longevity of your career, right? You're risking your career to sell this product. You better know what's going on and what it looks like and how good it is. Something that's always funny is if you're not a full cycle sales rep, you only sell to close. Well, what's your actual churn rate? What's your time to value? How's the CS team doing? Are they all of a sudden doing layoffs? Are they scaling up? What's that mean? What's your relationship with the CS team? And so those things, I think, play a big role into your sales career. And that's something I wish I learned earlier, but that's something I like to think about a lot now. I touched on this earlier, but good coaching and when you join an organization, make sure you have a career plan if you're new. If you have to join as an SDR, sharing, hey, I need to know what the path and the timeline is to being promoted. Even if you're not an SDR, if you start out in mid-market or SMB, making sure that your company defines that career plan and that you're committed to it and it's clear, it's transparent. I would say a lot of reps get screwed by communication and vagueness in career plans. And a lot of times reps feel like it's the manager's fault where it rolls up to the top because that's just not formalized yet. But if you know that early, then you at least know, hey, this is something that isn't here instead of expecting or wishing for it. And then I think the third one for something I wish I knew is having industry experience with something that you love. I learned ad tech in college through one of my senior projects, running Google Ads. I worked with a local engineering firm also as a side job. And then when I worked for Eric, I redesigned our website, did some digital marketing stuff, and then I went and joined into an ad agency. It was really cool to dive into an industry specific thing that I was passionate about, and I liked it because it was data driven. I knew I didn't want to work in the agency space anymore, but I knew I wanted to do it on the side. So it's like a fulfilling thing for me, an industry experience. It's not what I want to continue selling or doing, but I do have as a passion thing on the side. I think that's important for sellers. If you just sell your one product and you aren't 100% in it and haven't been spending a long time on it, you're going to be in a challenging position to not get burned out. So I think that other side of the house helps me stay sustained with energy. So that's first. I'll pause for a second about things I wish I knew before I talk about what reps can do to differentiate themselves.
Yeah, those are really good, man. I think it's funny the passion piece. It's something that I think it was probably about 7 years ago. I had a epiphany kind of moment where I was like, man, life's short, and we spend the majority of our times working, and so we might as well actually enjoy what we're doing. And in sales especially, right, there's something to be said for people, they hear it in your voice. If you believe in what you're doing or don't believe in it, if you're passionate about what you're doing, or even I even think a lot of times about momentum. Something I focus a lot of times on is sales momentum and how do you get that within a culture, and getting early wins and what that does. Because the reality is I remember when I first started my own SaaS company, and I would try to go sell. I was selling out of a place of desperation, to be quite honest, and it comes across people pick up on that. And it's funny, the second I got to this point of I'd got a couple wins under my belt, you start getting that confidence. You start actually believing I actually see now how the problems that I'm solving for other people makes a huge difference. So no, those are all really good. So kind of in closing here, when you look at, I don't have to go necessarily too much detail on this, but what are just a couple of things that you would say, hey, these are really big differentiators that most reps out there aren't willing to do or aren't doing, day in and day out, that's helpful for either reps that have even been reps for a long time, but maybe just helping them see, hey, just by being a little disciplined on these few things, man, that makes a huge difference. What would some of those things be?
Yeah. I think if I called it out, something that I'm always getting better at that we haven't touched on today is communication. So internally, not doing circle conversations. What I mean about that is commonly folks will talk and they'll talk about a problem and they'll say, hey, we'll figure this out. We'll do this. And then there's no action. There's no timeline. So anytime you're having a second conversation about something, there's a problem, unless there's progress. So making decisions, actions, and the timeline, even if you're the only one doing it, you need to practice that to then work at, in the future, a high performing company. And people will respect it. You might be a pain in the ass to a lot of people that don't agree with that, or don't want to put in the work to do that, but it will pay off. Trust me. And then externally, learning to be direct, respectful, and concise with your customers. For example, I'm hiring for a senior AE right now, and I asked a few questions in the application, saying, "Hey, why do you want to work here? Why would you be a good fit?" And it's amazing how much fluff people put into those descriptions, where the folks that can shortly describe to me why they want to work for this company, why they would be a good fit in a respectful, direct, and concise way, stands out to me. You have to pretend that you have the most limited time possible to communicate with a sales rep. And if you can do that by ROI, by word, in the least amount of words possible, that's a good way to operate, in my opinion. So communication's huge. And I think number 2 would be a good teammate. Just working well with your team. I think if your manager is not making your organization better, your team better, take that on yourself. Like, it's going to be better for your career to build a case study, to build a competitive plan against how to talk against this competitor, how to build a mutual action plan for this product. And so I think just being a good teammate, those people stay friends for life potentially. And that shows a lot, and they'll help you out. And it's good practice just to know how to build for your career going forward.
Those are great. And it's interesting to me. It's something I had to learn too. I feel like a little bit later in my career, something I wish I had known earlier, is it's a small world. And it's amazing at how, even our relationship, like starting on, cold outreach on LinkedIn or lukewarm outreach on LinkedIn, like, you just never know, people and how they can impact and how you can help them. And then also potentially it helps you long-term as well. And so I think a lot of times we get so caught up in the short term, and I need, especially in sales, like I need a sale right now. And I get it. I totally get the like short-term bucket of sales, but if you really want to be successful long-term, both in sales and honestly the career, right? Like building those relationships for the long-term and understanding like you're not doing this necessarily with the expectation I'm going to get something in return, but acknowledge that more than likely at some point, if I just treat people well, like, and I treat them like I'd want to be treated, like there is something to be said for it. So that's awesome. Well, hey man, thanks so much for joining today. This was great. Just to get an overview, I think what I really liked about this was some of the details, because I think at the end of the day, you hit on some highlights around learning and constantly learning and loving what you do. And I think communication, man, that's one that all of us, I think, can take a lot away from. And how do we get better at it? Even myself. I mean, I spent a lot of time kind of cross-departmental in my roles, and man, it's so key. Like, even just providing summaries. And when I think back on that rep I was talking about earlier, like they provided that summary. It's simple. Like sometimes it's the simple things around communication, and to your point, succinct communication, that are really huge. So really appreciate you sharing your perspective today with us. And if you don't follow Tanner yet, definitely look him up on LinkedIn. Watch him. I'm excited to see as your career progresses and how we can support each other, but really appreciate you joining today.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. I really appreciate it. It was fun to be here and excited to see where things go. And yeah, people are always welcome to hit me up on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Cheers. Thank you for joining us today to another episode of RevOps Revolution. Thanks for being a part of the revolution. Please tune in to learn more about different ways that we can help affect change within our companies. Thank you for joining us today on the revolution and being a part of it. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Feel free to join in on future episodes to learn more about how we can affect change within the industry. To the journey.